My name is Irene Wegner, and this is for the Fairhope Public Library for their archives so that they can have this information available for people who might want to find out more about what happened to our veterans. This interview is Charles Hall, who born and raised here too in Fairhope?
Yes, I was born and raised in Fairhope. And
that's great. That's great.
It's always had a special place in my heart. It was a joy growing up here.
Well, what was so wonderful about it? Tell me about it.
I guess the freedom of movement, even though I was born in 1946. So this period of growing up was, say, because I graduated 9th grade in 1952, something like that, I believe. But there was just so much openness. There was plenty of places to explore. We had access to the beach. It was just a wonderful place to grow up.
That's great.
Our education, I feel, that was wonderful during that period of time. Even though we were segregated, I feel that we had some very great educators.
Did you go to the Annie Jenks school?
Anna T. Jenks, yes. Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
Okay.
And of course, my early education was parochial at the Sacred Heart Catholic School in I guess it would be more in Montrose, I guess, possibly, but in Daphne.
In Daphne, so, okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I spent about 3 years there.
Did you like the public school better?
I did. I didn't really feel any difference. I guess there was a lot of familiarity with the teachers. My first grade teacher, of course, upon starting, I knew her and I knew her family.
There you go.
Yeah, so there was some familiarity there.
So you left from here to go into the Army? Is that what you did?
No, I didn't. I went to college in 1964.
Okay.
In Tuskegee, Alabama, which was which was in Tuskegee Institute, and that was during the 60s. And if you recall, this was a very pivotal point during our history of 64, 65, and
quite a lot going on.
A lot going on. And besides the war was was happening
the civil rights things going on.
Exactly. And I had a considerable amount of participation in that.
Tell me about it.
It was different for me because in the Black Belt of Alabama, I felt that there was a difference. I didn't get the feeling that you get here in Fairhope relative to race relations. At that time, in growing up, I was aware that the majority of the citizens here in Fairhope came from out in the Midwest and the North, and
even in the 1960s.
Well,
wow.
Even for, should we say, back in the 50s.
Okay.
This is what we were aware of. I mean, and this was a fact of life.
Yeah.
So it was a different climate of people. Even I think as you leave Fairhope and go north in the county towards Baymonette, there was a different socio.
Did that have to do with all the turpentine things going on up north and the workers and how the difference in the work relations?
No, I don't think so, because the last turpentine farm that I remember here was located where the Fairhope Airport is now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was the last large stand of pine trees that I can remember here, and I can probably remember when there was some turpentine going on in this area.
Well, back to the black belt and the feelings up there, the were not as cordial. They were more strict and
right. Well, remember, and I was a college student. I was 18, 19 years old.
Yeah.
And what we were doing was going out into those counties to actually register black people to vote.
It's very dangerous.
And I saw different things that bothered me, and I guess being from Fairhope, there was a different feeling of race relations, I guess, because I grew up here, and my mother worked as a maid, and she worked for a family from Chicago, Illinois. Their last name was Strongberg, and this was a winter home for them. They left the north during the winter to come here to spend the winter because of the milder winters.
Oh yeah.
So the relationship was different, and I always respected Mr. Strongberg. I always enjoyed him. He owned a what they would call now a hobby farm, that he owned here. It was called the Southland Orchards. That was located where the Fairhope High School is now. And I mean, as a child, as a young boy, back in the 50s, I always enjoyed riding out with him, and what I would do is open the gates for him. And he'd pay me 50 cents a gate, the day. So, at that age, 50 cents was a lot of money. That went a long way.
You better believe it. Yeah.
For change, for school, and what have you.
Yeah.
And but we and I enjoyed that, and it was really more or less I felt like a family, And of course, after he died, I mean, there was occasions that I would even stay with her when she was here, because she didn't want to stay alone, because her mother had passed also. And I would stay here, and she kept the home here for a while until she decided that she wanted to go back to Chicago and live permanently. And
by that time you had gone to school.
Well, I was in high school. I was in high school by that time.
Okay, all right.
And as a matter of fact, before I left grade school, she had a German maid. Remember her name well, Martha, because she was always so kind to me. I mean, at Christmas she always sent a gift.
Oh, wow.
And she would make things and cook things. A very, very sweet person. And Miss Strongberg asked my mother if she would come up and live with her, stay there. So my mother left here when I was probably in the 8th grade, and she stayed way past me graduating until I was really a grown man and out on my own until she passed.
Yeah.
And she came home. But to say that when I talk about the difference between the Black Belt and Fairhope during my years of youth, and I don't know, maybe it was my situation that they lived there on the beach and I had freedom. My mama had me to go to the bank and do all of our banking. I knew the bankers. I knew the people who worked at the post office, and there was a bookstore next to the post office, and I've always had a fascination with books and magazines and what have you. And not that I don't necessarily want to buy them, but I would go in that magazine store and all the ones that I enjoyed would be in the back of the store. And of course, the owner or the proprietors knew that I was there. And man, I'd sit there for hours during the summer and go through those magazines. And
now, would you ever come to the library? Because I heard that the black people in Fairhope didn't come to the library. They didn't feel welcomed here. They had to go to the school to get their books. Is that inaccurate?
I can't remember during the time that I was growing up, where was the library at that time?
Oh,
I don't even know.
Okay.
You know, I can remember when this one was built, but I don't, and you might be able to refresh my memory as to where it was located. I don't.
I have no idea.
I don't recall.
I have no idea either. So,
you know, in my years of growing up, I guess that, or after becoming an adult, I know that there was a library located where the City Hall is located now. You know, in that auditorium on the end of that auditorium.
Okay.
But you know, what I'm basically saying is that my relationship with people here, I saw a difference when I went to mid-Alabama, and especially considering voter rights. I knew that my father was a registered voter, and he voted, and I know that there were other black men in this community who were registered voters. So, you know, I never really thought about it. You know, everything will be okay. When I grow up, I want to vote too. And remembering that I also grew up during a period of Jim Crow. So I saw some of that. I can't say that it affected me negatively or necessarily positively. It was one of those things that you just accepted as a way of life. I knew that I was exposed to things because of my mother's relationship with the Strombergs, that I had opportunities to go places with her, and she could care less necessarily about what the rules were. You're going to have lunch with me, so we're going to go in here and sit down and have lunch. And nobody's going to refuse to serve you. And
but that was different when you got to the black belts.
Right. Yeah. And of course, reminding you that Jim Crow laws were not, they were still in place, but they had been well challenged.
Did you belong to any of the groups like SICK or any of those?
Yeah.
So did you know, what's his name, Zeller, or any of the other people from here that were involved in that, or were you, or any of the civil rights people like John Lewis, or did you ever meet any of those people?
Yeah, I have been to
He's a hero
meetings.
of mine.
Yeah, I have been to meetings during that period where John Lewis officiated.
Wow.
You know, there in Montgomery. And during that period of time at Tuskegee, and one hero of mine, as you say, was Robert Kennedy. Robert Kennedy had put a lot of federal funds into that area of Alabama at the time to get people registered to vote. And you know, they had rental cars. If you remember back during that period of time, all rental cars were white. You know, you never got a rental car in color.
Okay.
It just did not exist.
Okay.
If there was a rental car, it was going to be white, wherever, you know. And but as students, we went out as groups throughout all areas, and I can remember going to a church meeting, and it actually felt like what we were doing, that we had to hide to do it because of fears of harm.
Were
And
there people spying on?
yeah, I can remember on one occasion, I don't know, they could have very well been there to protect us, I don't know. But when we left there one night, there was a highway patrol parked along the road leading out. And trust me, we were in a very rural area.
Yeah.
Very rural.
Yeah.
But that was a point in time in my life, and I told my mom, well, look, I'm kind of tired, and school, I kind of lost interest.
So.
And I said, well, look, why don't you let me come to Chicago and see if I can get a job and work a while. And I did. I went up there in '66, I think it was. And I started work for a company called the Teletype Corporation, which was an arm of AT&T at that time. And I don't know if you can remember the teletypes, I'm sure. And for processing data. And we're going to pick up on something here as I go through this, is how sometimes a track is laid for your life and you just happen to fall into it. But I worked there for quite a while. The people were very satisfied with my work. But I lived downtown. So in order to get, and this was out in Skokie, Illinois, I don't know if
I don't know. Grew up in Evanston.
Did you? Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, all right. All right. So you can imagine what type of trip it was to get from downtown to Skokie, Illinois.
Yeah.
There was a bus and a train and what have you, and sometimes I had to be up and out looking for that bus on Chicago Avenue at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, wow.
In order to make my connections, to get out there.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't a timely thing that I could do. And of course, and I understood the fact that, the company had rules that we're very satisfied with your work. We like what you do. But the rules are that clock has to be punched at 7 o'clock. Period. No allocations, But about that time, that early period there in '67, they had a snowstorm there in the Midwest.
Oh, yes.
And it locked the city down.
Yes.
When
67.
when I left work, and I'll never forget it that day, because this building, there was no windows, so and it was snowing a little bit when I left, and I had some little shoe boots on my shoes, And but when I got off, snow was up to my hip, and I got on the last bus and got to a train, but I was able to get home. But that evening there was nothing moving but the trains, nothing, and that went on for a few days.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
I remember
don't think, they weren't even the city was not prepared for a snowstorm.
Not like that one. No, I remember that very clearly. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
but from there, I came home, and my mother was doing some additions on our home, and she said, "Well, why don't you go down and work on that with me?" And of course, when I came down, I registered for the draft.
So you were drafted.
I was drafted. So it wasn't too long after that I got my letter,
and it was Army.
It was the Army. Yeah.
Okay. Is that what you wanted to do? Was Army, or did you care?
I was not really concerned. I can't say that the military was going to be my thing. I wasn't afraid of it.
So your experience with the teletype, did that help you find a job in the Army, or?
Well, what happened is I went to Fort Benning for basics, and of course, like I say, we all know that the war was a very hot item at that time. Being a young man in his, I would have been approaching 20 by that time. You didn't really watch it real close. I knew that I'd lost a cousin. I'd lost a cousin there, first cousin. but it didn't really. When you're at that age, you don't necessarily fear death.
You don't think it's going to happen to
to
you?
you
Yeah,
know?
right. Yeah.
So, after being drafted, of course, the military does some testing and what have you, and they approached me with the proposition of giving one additional year if I would accept training as in communications or warrant officer school. Mm-hmm. Well, I knew what the warrant officers were doing, so I didn't want any part of that.
Oh, really? Why is that? What were they doing?
They were helicopter pilots. That's where
yes.
That's where the Corps of Helicopter Pilots came from.
That's right.
Yeah. And I said, well, okay, and I'll give you an additional year for that communication training, and it was microwave radio repair, which seemed like something all new out there. So that was a happenstance that I got into electronics. Okay.
Okay.
And of course, after getting out of the military, believe it or not, when I went out, I came home, took a 30-day leave, and relaxed for 30 days, and said, well, I guess it's time for me to get out and find a job, And a friend of mine who worked for, it was South Central Bell at the time, which was an arm of AT&T, and this is the connection back to the Teletype Corporation. I say, well, if you can see where I'm coming from.
Yeah. So how did you end up going over to Vietnam then?
In our class it was a 26-week course that we did there for that particular training. And at that time, from the description of what we were going to be doing, I felt that it would not be carrying a radio on my back and out of the field. They probably don't have this in Vietnam. That's my train of thought. Lo and behold, once we graduated, the whole class went to Vietnam.
And were you doing that? What you thought?
Yes, we actually we actually worked in our career field, but my God, it was in Vietnam. Period. And it just so happened that I arrived there about a month before Tet started.
Oh boy!
So that was kind of trial by fire.
I guess
that really rocked my world,
And what do you remember about that? About the Tet Offensive?
The fact that at night and sometimes during the day that there was constant harassment and now we were in I was in Pleiku, which was kind of in the what's called the highlands of Vietnam. Mm-hmm. It's at that time we were in 2 corps. If I make no mistake, if my memory serves me correct, there were three areas that Vietnam was divided into. There was South, Mid, and North Vietnam. Yeah. So there were 3 military operating zones, and we were in a 2 corps. 2 corps was mountainous, mm-hmm. and we were pretty close to the Cambodian border. Now, the job that we were doing was microwave radio transmission. It handled data, voice, and at that time could probably even handle video at that time. It was very advanced equipment. The service was contracted to a company, and we actually worked under the auspices of their technicians, who were mostly Australians and Filipinos. And I found that the Filipinos were very good at that job.
So what did you do? Did you have that on your back and go out there?
No, you could not
things,
believe me when I tell you that this is a 10 kW transmitter. And when I say troposphere communications, what you're doing is shooting a wave into the air.
Okay.
And your receiving port is also has a wave.
Okay.
And they cross. There's no what have you. So you transmit on that microwave signal.
So that other wave, you're sending one. Where's the other wave coming from? The enemy, or
no? We had stations in
Cambodia.
No, we didn't have anything in Cambodia.
Or you weren't
Weren't
supposed
to.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we had different stations around the country, and some were in the north, some were on the South China Sea, and I guess in our area we had a station in a town called Quinyan, and on my last period there, I was on a mountain called Vongshua Mountain, and it had transmitters that went to different areas.
So were you in a campsite, or were you in a tent somewhere out in the woods? I mean, how did that all work for you?
We lived in a Quonset hut,
okay,
or a wood barracks, and of course we were responsible for our own guard duty, and what have you, and there were some things that happened. I mean, and I always thought it strange. I mean, I can't recall the site equipment ever being hit during this whole period of time. But now the base was hit.
Yeah.
Which was, I felt was really harassment.
So was it dangerous to go take a shower because you might get hit, type thing, or?
It could be, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it could
Tell
be.
me about your hat. Can you show people your hat? What are all the badges for there?
Yeah, well, this is the Vietnam medal. I'll have to look these up for you.
Okay.
This is a service medal here I know.
Okay.
I don't really recall the name of it, but this is the Vietnam Service Medal.
Okay.
And in the Tet Offensive, and what that hat recognizes is that was trial by fire. I mean, it was the North Vietnamese surprised us, and they did that in coordination with the VC, that's the National Liberation Front, is what they actually were.
Yeah.
But they were the local people, and which.
Would you interact with the local people at all?
Oh yeah.
Because they would be come on the base and all.
Yeah, yeah. We had local people who worked as they call them hooch maids, and they did shined our boots and kept our fatigues, watched the fatigues and what have you, and each hooch maid would work for maybe 3 GIs or 2 or something like that, and you would pay for that service, so she got an income, that it was all combined to pay her.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you ever eat any of their food or anything like that?
Yes.
How did you like it?
That I ate was great. I mean, the noodles were good. They did very good noodles. and I'm a rice lover. I didn't care too much for the rice. Maybe it's the manner in cooking. I don't know. I never will forget. I was downtown one day, and because I was kind of always a skeptic, I knew that dog was on the menu there, and,
oh my!
And that's okay, but I don't do that. And my friend asked me, well, what could we get you for dinner? You want? I say, well, how about some seafood? And I said, well, what about some shrimp? And the lady came back and she cooked those shrimp that day, and it was 3 shrimp, and I could only eat 1.5.
They were that big?
They were that big.
Wow.
Yeah, huge. I guess what they would call after I left, I guess they're called prongs or something. They were bigger than my hand. And they split them to cook them. So,
great,
yeah.
Great.
But it was okay. Even today, there are odors. I guess if I were to smell anything like it, it would be very recognizable if I'm near a beach or something, because they dried things like squid and what have you, and it had a very distinct odor to it.
Different spices and all that they use. Yeah.
I have always been a very curious person, so I didn't have a problem in relating to the people of Vietnam. And
how was the race relations there? You had Filipinos, you had Australians, you had, I'm assuming, black and white people in your group?
Yeah.
How was that?
The Australians, because the Australian Army was there. The Australian Army, I didn't really interact with, but there were Australian civilians who worked for a company called Pacific Architects out of California, and so did the Filipinos. They ran, like some of this equipment that we worked on required daily maintenance, I guess, in truing up the signals. I guess in tuning the equipment so that the frequencies remain stable. And there on each one of our stations we had what's called a switchboard, and at that time we probably could have been considered blessed. I never did do it, but some of the guys were even able to make a connection to call home.
Oh, cool.
During this time, but that would have been very rare. But it was some of the guys who worked there on the switchboard were able to do that.
So did you ever call home? Or
no, I never did.
No. How was the communication with home? Were you able to get things from home?
Oh yeah. My mother was very sweetheart. She was a sweetheart. I tell you, I love her.
That's
always
great.
got that box, and it was nice to be able to share it with people, and how she would come up with some of the things to send. And she was in Chicago at the time too, but I never will forget like bread in a can, but she'd send things like that, and things that she would make quite often, and that kept me going. Being at that age, I did some very dumb things. I mean, I really did some dumb things.
Like?
Well, marijuana was plentiful, so.
You tried it?
I tried it. Yes. It was. It was a part of the routine. I knew that there were other drugs out there, but it never crossed my mind, because I've seen people under it, And I said, well, you know, that's not good because you can't come from under that. You know, there's nothing you can do once you're under that influence. So that's I never did let myself drift that way. But yeah, and there was alcohol. Alcohol was cheap, and we.
Did you ever have any celebrities come or anything like that, or were you too small a group?
Well,
like Bob Hope touring or any of those other things like that?
No, but we had entertainment.
Yeah.
And most of the time it was Filipinos.
Oh.
Girls, and you know, this was back in the days of the go-go too. Okay. So yeah, you had Filipino,
that's interesting.
Yeah, but and I'm sure this might have been happening on other posts. As I was about to tell you, you know, the massness of it was it was tremendous. The number of people and the number of areas. I mean, it was like a city. I mean, and you know, you've got hospitals, airports, infantry compounds from various countries, what have you.
Well, it's quite a big place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was large.
So did you feel secure there then? Pretty secure with all that going on.
I don't know that at that time that security was an issue. As we mentioned when we started, I don't think I had sense enough to fear anything. You know, you just didn't. There was so much living going on that you didn't. I can't remember feeling that way from day to day. I worked a 12-hour shift, and this would be recording and keeping up with readings and checking alarms on equipment. Some of these transmitters were located in vans, about the size of a house trailer, and they had a tube on them and that generated up to 10,000 watts of power, of microwave power.
Oh my gosh.
It's a tube called, back then it was called a klystron, okay? And and it went out went out of the building, and this stuff was so expensive that these tubes that sent this signal out to what's called a feed horn. And this feed horn, it would burn you like a microwave. You know, you could cook a steak on it.
Okay.
You could cook a steak on it.
Did anybody ever try that?
We had one stupid captain, and I guess I just thought it was ridiculous that he would do that. You know,
want it to be like when kids put marshmallows in the microwave.
Yeah.
You know, boom.
Yeah.
But what about your safety from all this microwave? The microwaves, does that do anything physically to the people operating this?
I guess for years I have thought about that.
Yeah.
A lot of times I would go into a room where in one area that we had so much of it that they had what's called a heat exchanger. And of course I have often wondered in being, and it was so warm, that would I ever, or after I'd gotten back I thought about it, I didn't think about it then, would I ever have some effect from it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But but you haven't.
So far, so good.
Okay, that's
So
good.
far.
Do you have any friends over there that you kept in contact with when you got home?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't, and that's surprising because we were close.
You were
Not
close.
that I don't think about these guys. I think about them often, and I wish sometimes that I could locate them. And every now and then, I get a military magazine, and I'll check through it and see, if anybody's name shows up. But I guess by virtue of the fact when everybody gets home, they get back to their living.
How was that for you?
In some ways, I was rather disappointed. One thing that I found interesting about Vietnam was the camaraderie of the people. And you had asked me about race relations during this period of time. It was not good in Vietnam. Racism existed extensively. In March of '68, by the time I had arrived at one of my stations, I found it, and I picked up a newspaper at the air base, and I'm going up this hill, and it's red clay, which certainly reminded me of Alabama. I've seen red dirt in Alabama, but hey, they got red dirt over here. They okay, But that's when I found out Martin Luther King had been assassinated.
Oh wow!
Which was a very difficult period there for a lot of black guys. And I didn't promote dissension, but I was a little older than some of my comrades, and maybe a bit more education, and having been a bit closer to what Martin and John Lewis were doing, I had a different outlook on it. But I think all in all, it seems that there was, and I had white friends. I'm not going to say that, but there were groups of people who I felt were stuck in that battle flag thing. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So were you able to use, or did you want to use when you got back a GI Bill for education or anything like that?
I did go to school for a while, but again, I say that when I returned, I went to AT&T and applied for a job, and I got a good job.
Well, yeah, you should have.
You
had the experience.
Good job at that time, and I progressed up to to management, and my last job there was in training. Before I decided to leave, and I left because I had reached a point that I could not take the pressure during divestiture and when the company began to break up. I didn't. It had lost that family feeling to me.
I understand.
And I very well understand that things had to happen to create this. If it had not happened, this would have been years still to come, because AT&T wouldn't have taken that step. Why move on to something when you're making money just fine?
How's the military service experience? How's it affected your life?
When we came back, the Vietnam vet, uh, there was no show of appreciation. So
I know.
for 40 some years, I held a lot in. I never talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
I never.
Well, appreciate
Never.
you're doing it now.
Yeah.
That's very helpful to those who have no clues about it.
Yeah.
Really is helpful. Yeah.
And that, you know, and I know very well that there were things that happened there. There were things that probably happened in every war. It hurt me. Just like I say, I came there during the period of Tet.
Yeah.
And there were young men of my age that I give a lot of respect for what they did to push back on that offensive. That they put it down in short order. When I left, Vietnam was won. But that's not the story that the American people was getting.
No. Yeah.
You know, and no one likes to lose. You know, a soldier doesn't like to lose. You know, we were beaten in the halls of Congress. They threw us to the dogs. Okay.
So as you think about that, your feelings about war and military in general, what would you tell a young person thinking about that?
I think it's a very meritorious thing to do. You know, I think back that I probably could have gone to Canada. You know, I mean that opportunity was placed out there for me. And I never will forget my father telling me, say, well, look, I'm very proud of you that you have chosen to give this service to your country. Come what may, and he lost a nephew at this point in time, so I'm sure he had feelings about that.
Yeah.
You know, that was his only sister's son. No, I didn't. And I guess if I had to do it, I'd do it over again if that's how things worked out.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah,
Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to talk about?
I can't think of anything. I guess you would have to trigger a thought.
You have been wonderful. You really have just flowed from one thing to another very well, and it's fascinating information. So I appreciate that. Well, we're going to say that the interview is over, but I must say we have a lot of information here that is just so exciting for people to know about. I mean, I am just thrilled to know somebody who worked in the civil rights issues down here, because that had to be so scary, and I really appreciate your doing that.
Really. You know, when you say scary, I never will forget that one time, you know, Dexter Avenue facing the Capitol, we had come over from Tuskegee on buses. Okay, we had a meeting at if I make no mistake, it was a meeting at a Methodist church in that next street over. I can't recall it, but it was maybe one block from Dexter. You know, the students got off, and you had people in SNCC who were organizing. These guys had on helmets and what have you, and there were cars parked on both sides of the street. It was a wide street, and the street dead-ended. If you've ever been up there, dead-ended at the Capitol, and some office buildings and what have you. And we were all out there, and they told us just to sit down there on the pavement, and we did. And I never forget that there was a young lady with me, and they were talking about, and the guys would be running in and out because the I don't know, highway patrol or sheriff's deputies and what have you had kind of blocked us in from going out of Dexter, you know, on that side of us. And, you know, some of these guys were sneak, they would be running in and out, and, you know, the guys would be slamming with these clips because they had on helmets, so they knew, you know, they might take a lick to the body, but they put on something to protect their heads. And me and this girl was sitting there, and the next thing I know, I looked over to the right, and there's a hill, and I'm sure that hill is probably still there at the Capitol. They probably hadn't changed that much. To the right, facing the Capitol.
Okay.
And you got all these horses coming across the hill.
Oh my gosh.
I said, oh my God. I told her, I said, listen, if something happened, we're going under that car.
Good idea to have a plan. Yeah. So.
Yeah, but, and it was something, you know, the people who worked in the offices, they would open the windows and they would be hollering out derogatory words and statements, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's something else. Wow.
'Tis life, you know. And I pray every day. With some of the things that I've had to go through in my life, I ask Jesus Christ to come into my life and change me, and I try to live by that. I know that He's my Savior, you know.